They said it couldn't be done. I honestly don't know if they said that, but it has been done. Benjamin Netanyahu's hold on political power in Israel has finally, maybe briefly, gone away. After 12 years in charge, no more. And we've got something far more complicated to replace it. We have this unity government, a combination of a variety of different parties that don't necessarily seem to get along on some fairly core issues, but we'll see how that goes. So they're calling for right-wing former defense minister Naftali Bennett to serve as prime minister for 2 years before handing over the job to centrist Yair Lapid. Isn't it interesting, man, to know like ahead of time how that's gonna go? Like imagine some sort of deal being brokered in the US where it's like, okay, that 2000 election, that was rough. So you know what, we're gonna give Bush 2 years and then Gore gets it. Inconceivable, Francesca. Like we got a lot more, we got a ton more, but
don't threaten me with a parliament this early in the morning, John. I can't, my heart. I haven't had enough coffee.
Yeah,
but yes, keep going.
I'm fueling up as well. So, but basically the coalition, the ruling coalition that's gonna be producing this very interesting transfer in power for the prime ministership is composed of 8 different, incredibly ideologically disparate parties from the left, center, and the right, including, for the first time in Israel's history, a party from the country's Arab Islamist community. So that is certainly going to be interesting. And by the way, it was the fact that they got this coalition in the end was fairly fraught. Very close vote, 60 to 59 in the Knesset. In a sign of challenges to come, one lawmaker who had originally agreed that they were going to support this coalition decided not to at the last minute, but they had one vote waiting in the wings of a hospital that lawmaker had to leave to vote and then returned to her hospital bed afterwards. So, wow. But I mean,
I'm not laughing.
Obviously, it's you don't necessarily want to have a party that's sort of ruling by such narrow margins, but at least it's an area of the world that, like, just nothing really happens. It's just good vibes all the time. So it should be fine. What are your thoughts? I think
it's an incredible sign of like how much Netanyahu has fallen from favor that someone would lift themselves out of their hospital bed and like, I can imagine just sort of the IV drip in hand, like, oh my God, get me to that vote. I'm there. Obviously, I don't know who this is. I wish them well, but good move, power move. It's huge that Netanyahu is out. I mean, I think that it is important to understand what a big change this is and also say good riddance, right? Bye-bye, goodbye. Yeah. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. He's not, obviously we're gonna talk about how he's not gonna try and be gone, but that he has so radically shifted politics in Israel to the right for the worse. And that this new government might not actually be better. There are elements that are far more right wing, but at least in that moment, especially when we're talking about if Israel does consider itself a democracy, which is questionable considering how it treats Palestinians living inside of it, as well as in the occupied territories. But if it has a semblance, it needed to move on from Netanyahu being the prime minister and at the helm of this. So I say good riddance, like I'm welcoming a change. I'm not expecting much, but I'm interested to see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. Is it like, okay, you can get rid of Trump, but you get Dick Cheney?
Totally.
Like, yes. Well, that's not better, but yes.
In coalition with Jill Stein, and you're like, what? Exactly. Weird. Wait, I don't know.
And also Bullock's on board. I don't know. Exactly, kind of like that. Yes. So as you've been saying, as I alluded to earlier, this is a complex situation that raises a lot of, I think, very interesting questions about how, if worse, and probably worse, how much worse, on which issues, on which other issues will the sort of disparate nature of the coalition actually lead to less far right outcomes? What does this have to say for the future of the peace process, for relations with other countries in the region? And to all of those, I say, I have no idea. I don't know anything. You know what? You know what's needed on the internet? People in positions like me saying they don't know, because they generally don't know. They just don't say that they don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm doing some reading, I'm doing some research. We're gonna bring on some experts to try to understand the situation, but I have no goddamn idea. Let's see if we can figure something out based on a little bit of the early scholarship on this change and what's known about members of the coalition. So, Mr. Bennett's religious Zionist party, Yamina, supports annexation of large parts of the West Bank and vehemently opposes Palestinian statehood, positions antithetical to some of its own governing parties, which I find so fascinating. By the way, that party only won 7 of the seats in the parliament, making it the smallest faction to ever hold the premiership. So in a coalition of 8 parties, it actually has very, very few seats. By the way, Netanyahu's party actually won 30 seats in March's election, but because it's a parliament, simply having the most seats isn't what really counts if you can't put together a governing coalition. So despite having won more than 4 times as many seats as the party for whom they now have the prime ministership, he is out of power. And so what I wonder is, how often can there be a reconfiguring of the coalition? If Bennett's party does some insane things in the West Bank, could some of the more leftist parties drop out? Would that then, I don't know. This is very complicated.
Oh God, once again, the joys and the intrigue of a parliamentary system of having more than 2 parties. What I do know is that sadly, the Israeli left, and I take whenever it is reported on that there's a real leftist party in Israel with a grain of salt, because they've largely been sidelined, right? And I mean, again, similar to Trump, Netanyahu created a politic in which everyone wanted to be more Netanyahu and more Trump in the United States than he himself, right? So that's why you have Naftali Bennett being like, I do want to annex, large parts of the West Bank. Netanyahu doesn't necessarily go that far, but he's doing it. Do you know what I'm saying? And so and that's the other thing is if their seats in parliament have the ability to block this coalition from getting quote unquote anything done, and by anything done, that might actually be annexing other people's land, then they might lose control, right? And so my hope is that given how incredibly, again, far right some of Israeli politics are right now, that at least a little bit of gumming up the works will help, and help for social movements with inside Israel, right? And progressives and real leftists to hopefully gain and put pressure on their government. And I think that's a possibility now that Netanyahu's power hold is shown to be broken and shown to be weaker, right?
Yeah, potentially. I think that's a good takeaway. I'm not gonna read the last few graphics. Just know that Netanyahu is not taking it well. I'll say that. He's been sort of freaking out, but whatever. He says he'll be back. I don't know. The world's terrible. He's probably right. He probably will be back, but we'll find out.
No, he says he will be back, but he's also like, I'm going to make sure you fail. It's very you kids, end of Scooby-Doo. I'll get you next time. I feel like I've been doing a lot of Inspector Gadget in this, but lately it's my thing. Just have an iron fist. But I think the other thing, I had a thought, John, and it was smart, and then it left me.
Oh, okay. Well, perhaps it'll come back. You know what? And we can always return to it. That's the free form nature of the internet. Anyway, we will of course, be watching for this, and far more importantly, I'm going to try to bring on some hopefully reasonable and incompetent journalists from the region to see if they can do the difficult job of keeping me up to date with what's going on there, because of course it matters for a lot of people who have historically been through quite a bit, and even recently have as well. What would that last situation have been had this coalition been in charge? Those are the sort of stakes that we're talking about. So we will be watching. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.